My name is Tara Marie, and MAERE Makes is mostly a knitting podcast. I currently live in Hamilton, Ontario, which is situated on the traditional unceded territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. I am back with more finished objects, works in progress, and yarn acquisitions, so grab your knitting and let's keep each other company for a while. Hello, my friends. I am filming on a beautiful sunny Saturday morning, as I often am. I feel like I really need to take advantage of these sunny mornings while they are still here. It is absolutely freezing outside. I don't know what the temperature is right now, but when I woke up this morning, it was -4. We're not pleased about that. I really do not have a very good relationship with winter. I don't really participate in any winter activities. I have a hard time with the lack of sunlight. I have a hard time with the cold. But I was thinking about it earlier this week, and I had like a bit of a perspective shift when it comes to winter. I thought about how many sweaters I could knit over the winter until it's spring. And it's not that many. I can't knit that many sweaters until it's, like March or April and the sun is back in full force and it's getting kind of warm out. So that's all it took. And now it seems like winter isn't like this big, scary thing anymore. I used to just always think about how it dragged on, and I mean, it's not, our winters are quite long here. I am usually in my winter coat from October to April, but I'm also I'm a baby, I can't handle the cold in any capacity, so I know I'm a bit of an outlier. But yeah, I don't know, just thinking about how much knitting I could get done in that time, it just made it so much more manageable. Now that I've moved on from the weather, I do have a little bit more chit chat. It is knitting related, but if you want to skip that, feel free to just go to the next chapter in the video. But I have some bad news. I need to share it with you so that I don't cry. But I got up nice and early this morning because for me it's usually a bit of a rush to get ready for podcast episodes. I usually do them on Saturday mornings and my window of time to film is quite small. So I'm always, just in this huge rush to get ready and do all the things that I failed to do the night before to prepare. So I was I've got it this morning, woke up early, I can relax a little, I can have my first coffee of the morning, I can get ready, I can clean up and do all the busy work that I need to do before filming. So I was going through, I've got this really cute little yarn bucket that my friend Bradley gifted to me many, many years ago. So I'm going through these yarns for my yarn acquisition segment of the show. And I pulled out this cake of Isaïr alpaca. I'm not sure which one it is. They have an alpaca 1 and an alpaca 2, I think, maybe even more. But it's a very fine, beautiful alpaca yarn that I had been using a little over a week ago to swatch for a project. So I pulled out this cake. I thought maybe I'll chat about that this week. And I'm looking it over and I saw what looked like a piece of little black fluff embedded a little bit into the cake. It wasn't fluff. It wasn't fluff. I'm sure you can tell where this is going. It was moth larvae and what looked like about 1 million little freshly hatched moth babies. So I'm in trouble. I don't have a big freezer that I can dump all of my yarn into. I have a lot of yarn, a few tote boxes full, and all we have is the freezer that is underneath the fridge. So, I did immediately go outside and get the little living, crawling larva or whatever it was off of the yarn, but there are still all those little babies. So I popped that one into the freezer, and then with all of my extra time this morning, I ran around bagging everything that is not bagged. Now, thankfully, I do have most of my yarn in bags and then in plastic storage, but I've really been enjoying having some lovely yarns on display. I had these ones here. I had another little basket that it was shown in my intro full of beautiful yarns, and like I was just really loving looking at my stash and dreaming of all the things that I could make. And now I just need to put everything away, and it sucks. And I don't know how I'm going to deal with this issue. It is a good excuse to stop buying yarn for a while. And I think what I'm going to have to do is just ask my parents for some freezer money for Christmas. So yeah, it sucks, but at least once I do finally take care of it, I think I can rest somewhat assured that the problem is taken care of. I'll be more careful in the future, and I do want to keep having some yarns on display, but I think maybe I'll just be better about making sure that I rotate everything out, air my yarns out a little, maybe even just have like a constant rotation of yarns in the freezer. I don't know. I can't do this. I can't do it. And of course, like, you know, they ate a little hole in the cake that I had, but whatever. What can you do? Little shits. So now that I've gotten that trauma off my chest, let's talk about what I'm wearing. I recently finished, as you can see, my MERYWEN sweater by Meghan Fernandes and Lydia Gluck from the book Ready, Set, Raglan. So yeah, it is finally complete. This is my project for, as I've mentioned a million times, the collaboration between EweKnit and Inga of Knitting Traditions for a rustic knit-along. I know that striving for store-bought perfection in our knits is not a very good or healthy goal. I don't think it's even something that I want a lot of the time. I want people to be like, oh, did you make that sweater? Yes, I did. I do want things to look a little bit handmade, but when I make something that does seem like it could be store-bought, I feel really proud of myself, and I just love how it looks. I think that this sweater is beautiful. In case you haven't heard me talk about it yet before, this is a top-down seamless raglan. I purchased a cone from Woolly Knit to participate in the knit-along, and this is what I've got left. I do have a little bit more in here as well. I knit this sweater using 2 strands, so I did have to divide some as I went. But yeah, it used up quite a lot of the 500 gram cone. It came to about 1,970, so almost 2,000 yards because I was holding the yarn double. I have mentioned it previously, but this is one of those yarns that just absolutely transforms after blocking. When you're knitting with it, it almost has like a twine quality to it. There's something about it that's almost like a little bit, I don't want to say stiff, but it's just quite stringy. It also does have, where'd it go now? There's a fair bit of vegetable matter in it as well, which is common with rustic yarns, but I didn't find it to be a big deal. You just pull it out and move on. I actually think it's like kind of charming to find little bits of like grass or hay or whatever else might be in there. It's like proof that this actually came from a farm. I feel like we're often so like separated from the items that we buy, even when we do make our own clothes. Like, you know, these things just arrive in the mail. We don't see the sheep, we don't see the farmers, we don't really participate in any of that for the most part, unless you're purchasing locally or unless you're buying from like a co-op or a yarn manufacturer that is really good about that level of transparency. But a lot of the time, like, you just don't know. So yeah, it's just kind of nice to like have these little reminders that yes, this came from a real sheep. This was my very first time working with a cone, and I have to say I loved it. It was really nice just having like this almost never-ending strand of yarn to work with, even though I did have to divide some. Yeah, it was just a lovely experience. I love that it pretty much stands up on its own. It's not the most portable project in the world because, especially when you're starting out and you've got a big cone, you know, it's a bit harder to like take on the bus, but something about it just feels like extra cozy to knit with at home. I don't know. One thing that shocked me a little about working with this cone was how much I loved the smell of it. When I got this in the mail, I could not stop smelling it. It smells so good to me. And I actually thought it might have something to do with like the manufacturing, or maybe there was some sort of spinning oil. I know that that can be quite common with cones. But I asked my boyfriend what it smelled like to him, and he's like, it just smells like a sheep. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it didn't smell like sheep to me. I guess most of the yarns that I purchase, you can't really smell anything until blocking. Then it smells really sheepy and like not very good. But something about this just smelled so nostalgic to me. Like, it kind of smelled a little bit like my family cottage. It smelled a little bit like the basement of my childhood home. It smells almost like woodsy in a way. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up, but I just could not stop smelling it. It smelled so good. In terms of the sweater, like I said, it is a top-down seamless raglan. It has a cropped body, and it also has some very wide sleeves. At least that's what my experience was. I can't remember how much of this I talked about in the last episode, but it was just really confusing when I looked at other people's projects because they didn't seem to have very oversized sleeves, but I did. So I ended up reducing the size of the sleeves by 10 stitches, which is quite a lot, and I had to do some very rapid decreases when I first started the sleeve, but I don't think you can really tell. I thought that maybe it would give it some like wonky shape, but it didn't really. The sweater does have a little bit of a boxy fit, and then it also has split hems. The hems and the collar and the cuffs are all just a, you know, simple 1x1 rib, and the pattern does call for a standard bind off, but I chose to do a tubular bind off for everything. The pattern does give instructions for a shorter collar, a longer collar, and then a folded over collar, and I chose the shortest one. It has really great short row shaping so that the front hangs down a little bit lower than the back. I really love the faux seam that is here, and honestly, it was just a really easy to follow, great pattern. I feel like this is just such a classic sweater. Something like this, I can't see it like going out of style or being boring to wear. Super versatile. I love that I made it in a really light gray. I was missing something like that in my wardrobe, so super happy. And I thought that it would be like a bit of a slog because of the, you know, every other round being a knit one, purl one, but it really wasn't bad, and it was kind of interesting to like see the progress. And then, you know, of course, whenever you get to like a full knit row, you appreciate it all that much more. You're just like, ah, yes. The pattern uses a long tail cast on, and like I said, a standard bind off that I changed to a tubular bind off. And then for joining all of my yarns, I used the spit splice method. I don't know why, but I feel like I've never in my life had such a smooth and even cast on edge. I used to have a really bad habit of casting on super tightly when I did a long tail cast on. So now I try to loosen up a little bit, have some space between my stitches, but sometimes for some reason, some of my cast on stitches end up quite wide, and they're just not as even as I would like them to be. But for some reason for this sweater, maybe it was just the properties of the yarn, it was an extremely even, beautiful cast on. Like, I almost didn't even want to pick up stitches for the collar. It was just so perfect. And on that note, actually, when I was weaving in the ends for this sweater, I turned the whole thing inside out so that I could weave in the sleeve ends, the underarm ends. And I was like, wow, like, I've never made a sweater that looks so good turned inside out. And part of that is just the stitch. I think the inside of the stitch looks really interesting, but just that cast on edge is just so beautiful. In my opinion, I've never had such a nice cast on before. So honestly, I think I might end up wearing the sweater inside out every now and then. The underarms don't look that great, but that's the only part that isn't really all that good, and who cares what my underarms look like. The sweater weighs 383 grams, so it is less than a pound. My next and final finished object for the day is something that I haven't shown you before. It's brand new. And I can't remember the last time I knit something that is so beautiful and so filled with mistakes. It's rough, which is okay. It's okay that it's rough. It is my very first brioche project. And before I talk about the bad, can we just, like, appreciate the good for a second? Like, obviously, I'm having a moment with this color in my life. Yes, it's happening. I'm in love. Like, what is this yarn? So stunning. Okay, like, I know I've been talking about it, so I finally made myself a dickie, or a neck warmer. So this pattern is the Dies Winter Neck by, I want to say you pronounce her name, Tonje Hodne? She's Danish. And as you can see, it is a beautiful, beautiful neck warmer made in very squishy brioche, and it has these sort of shoulder sections so that it will rest neatly on your shoulders, and then there are the front and back pieces. Now, I did not knit mine as long as they are supposed to be because there's so many issues, and I just want to, like, have a think about it before I go on any further. The top of the neck warmer does fold down so that you can have this, you know, very luxurious turtleneck around your neck. You can also just, of course, wear it nice and open and up over your chin. You know what? I will put it on. This project was a little bit of a disaster from the very beginning. I unknowingly cast on an extra 10 stitches, and I didn't realize until I got to the part where the shoulder increases begin, because you do of course have to section off the piece into 4 different sections, the front, the back, and the 2 shoulders. And so as I was counting my stitches to place between my stitch markers, it was like, that's not working. What's going on? With 10 extra stitches, you can't divide that by 4 very easily. So I just had to sort of figure out where to put my stitches. I didn't want to do any decreases and mess up my brioche. I also had to make it so that the front and the back are 2 different sizes, because I'm pretty sure with this pattern, each section needs to both begin and end with a knit stitch. So I really had to fudge things a lot. And then, yeah, when it came to doing the increases, I wasn't 100% sure what I was doing. It's a very common problem in my knitting that one side of increases or one side of flat knitting looks great, super nice and neat and perfect, and the other side just looks like absolute trash. I think when it comes to brioche, it's mostly a matter of experience, but you can see, is it here? Yeah. So As I started to knit the flat bits, the edge here was just really not looking good at all. Like, I don't know, these stitches here just weren't very neat and they were just getting real funky. So I added some stitches so that I could have that nice knit edge. And now I've just got this like weird little like extra flap that comes out of nowhere. So that's not great. But yeah, as you can see, like the other side of it looks really good. My increases look good, my edge stitches look good. And it's just like that on the other side as well. Yeah, it's just not very nice on one edge. Lots of extra room in here. So I think I may try again. I may just end up pulling it all out. And honestly, I feel like I've missed my shot to wear it this year anyway. Like I said, it's -4. We've already had a little bit of snow. It has melted, but I think we're past the point of me wearing my fall coat, which is what I wanted this piece for. I do have time to knit up a new one, and really it's a very quick project. I think it was about 9 days of knitting, not full days. I just recorded which days I did actually work on this. I'm desperate to have this piece in this yarn. I am absolutely obsessed with this yarn. The yarn that I used for this project, forgive my messy cake, is Estelle Highland Alpaca Worsted. It is in the color lilac and it is just beautiful. I can't get over it. I love the color. I love the way that it feels. It is 60% wool. I'm assuming it's Highland wool, which I recently learned is a crossbreed between Merino and Corriedale. So it's very, very soft. And then, is it 60-40? Yes, it is 60% superfine alpaca, 40% mulesing-free Highland wool. It comes in 100 grams, which gives you 202 yards. And like I said, it is the color lilac, which is color number 12. And of course, it's made in Peru, but this is a Canadian company. They're actually located very close to where I grew up, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I want a sweater made out of it. I'm really on an alpaca kick right now. It's just so soft. And actually, when I wanted to make this pattern, I was experimenting with using mohair, but I did think about how close this would be to my mouth and all of those fibers that would inevitably get in my mouth and in my eyes and stuck to my lip balm. I'm still going to have that issue with the alpaca, but I feel like it'll be a little bit better. I mean, I will happily suffer alpaca fibers in my mouth if it means I get to experience this around my neck. And you know what? For all the mistakes, I'm so happy that I finally jumped into brioche. I feel like when it comes to knitting especially, but really with any new skill, I don't love how influenced I can sometimes be by other people telling me how hard things are. If you are a new knitter and there is something you want to try, do not listen to anyone who tells you it's too hard or too advanced. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. Maybe you'll actually be really good at it. I talk a lot about how when I started knitting, the knitting community didn't really exist in the way that it does now. There was no Ravelry. There were definitely forums, there were blog posts, things like that. But I felt very sheltered from it all. And while I'm sure that had some downsides, I think it was also really good for me as a knitter because I just jumped right into sweaters like as soon as I possibly could. I had knit one hat and I knit it flat using a boucle yarn. It was a terrible experience and I didn't knit another hat for a while after that. But I didn't knit it in the round because people kept saying how difficult it was at first and how terrified they were of DPNs. So I sort of stayed away from that. I knit a couple scarves, but those were super boring. So I was like, I'm just gonna make a sweater. And then I did. and it was fine. And after I knit one, I started improvising my own sweaters, and it was no big deal. I'm not saying that that's what every knitter's experience is going to be like. I'm not saying that everything I've tried has been easy. Obviously, it has not, and I still have so many things to learn. But I just feel like there are a bunch of things, especially within knitting, where I've thought, oh no, like that's a really hard thing. That's for like super advanced knitters. I'm not going to do that for a long time. I'm not ready for that yet. And it's just not true. Like if someone says something's hard, maybe it was just difficult for them. Maybe they didn't have the right tools. Maybe they didn't have the right instructions. Maybe they were going about it the wrong way. There are so many things that make a skill or a technique hard. And it may not actually be all that hard. You don't know how hard or how easy it will be until you do it. I just don't want anyone to be afraid of trying something because they think it might be too difficult. Because even if it is, who cares? You just rip out your knitting. I actually feel like it is such a beautiful and precious thing to be a newbie, because if you're not hearing things like that, it's like the world is your oyster. You have no idea what you can and can't do yet. You have unconscious incompetence, which is like one of my favorite feelings in this world, because you just go for it, you know? So yeah, if you're a new knitter, try things, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. So back to my project. Like I said, the yarn that I used comes in 100 gram skeins, and I only just slightly dipped into this one. There is still almost 90 grams left. But like I said, I did not knit it to the full length for the front and back pieces. So if I do knit it again, I'll probably end up using more. Once you get the hang of the brioche and the brioche increases, it is a very straightforward pattern. It's a very, very beautiful product. It does call for a tubular cast on, but I decided to skip that. I just really didn't feel like it. So I did a regular cast on, but then I did do a tubular bind off. That's actually one thing I want to bring up. I am getting so confused about this bind off terminology, because I've always called what I do a tubular bind off. But I saw a Suzanne Bryant video. I didn't watch it all just yet, but from her, I learned that some people confuse tubular and Italian bind off. But then I watched an Andrea Mowry video where the technique that I use, she refers to as Kitchener bind off with a single needle. So I'm all confused. All I know is the first time I ever did a tubular bind off, I Googled it and I found a tutorial, and that is now all that I use. So whatever it is that I do, I really like it, and it looks like this. Moving on now to my works in progress. I've only got a couple that I can show you. I do have one more, but I can't show that to you yet. That is for a future video. In episode number 4, I talked about my TERRAZZO sweater by PetiteKnit, and I don't have a whole lot to show you because I've had to focus on other projects, but I did rip out all of the collar that I was working on at that time. It was reversible, twisted rib, and it was a nightmare. I think this is the 4th time that I've worked on the collar now, and I'm gonna have to take it out again, so it'll be number 5, collar number 5. But anyway, here's how it looks at the moment. So I've given up entirely on twisted rib. I have just gone to a regular 1x1 rib. And you know, it looks really good on the inside, which will be really nice because it is a folded over turtleneck. So I'm excited about that, but it's looking really big. And I think that I'm going to have to go down a needle size. I went up a needle size to a 5mm in order to try to make the twisted rib work. It didn't work, so I ripped it out and kept my 5mm needle to work on a regular rib. And now I feel like it's much too loose and it's just going to be a huge turtleneck. It will at least fit over my head, but I think it'll just be a little bit too much. And honestly, I am so sick of knitting ribbing right now. Like, this was a lot of ribbing. I'm working on a bunch of ribbing for my other sweater. I had this brioche project, which isn't exactly ribbing, but as an English style knitter, I'm still going through the motions. So I don't even want to look at this right now, but I also do want to finish the collar before I move on with any other piece of the terrazzo. But, you know, it's all okay because I am going to get a pretty substantial break from this sweater, working on other sweaters. But other than that, I don't think I've done anything else on the terrazzo. I am excited to get through the things that I'm working on now so that I can go back to it. And now it's time for a coffee break. Oh, it's already noon. These podcast episodes really highlight for me how much of a solitary person I am. I never, ever talk this much. If you have a podcast, let me know if you just feel your voice wanting to give out halfway through. My throat is so tired right now. My next whip is part of another knit along that I have been mentioning in my previous podcast episodes, but I have finally started it. So here's my progress so far. This is for the Dream Sweater by EweKnit Toronto, and I do have one of the sleeves finished, as you can see, and then I also have this beautiful and exciting, thrilling tube to show you. It is a bottom-up sweater, which I don't love knitting, and they also just don't make for the most exciting content, in my opinion, especially when you don't have very much done. But I am excited to have the sweater in my wardrobe. I think the bottom-up style is curbing some of my enthusiasm, shall we say. It's just not all that exciting for me to knit. And another thing too is, well, there are two other things that I think are affecting my excitement. One is that this yarn isn't amazing to work with. It doesn't feel that great on my hands. I think it will be perfectly fine once it's blocked. But the yarn is BC Garn Loch Lomond, which is 100% organic wool. And this was a kit that I purchased from EweKnit Toronto. So this is the color Bordeaux and this is the color Sand. And I do really, really love the little bits of tweed in each of these. I feel like the two colors go together great, especially with these sort of orangey red bits of tweed in the sand color, and then the beige little bits of tweed in the Bordeaux color. I actually can't even remember what weight this is. I feel like maybe a DK. I'll double check that for you. It doesn't say on the label. It just says that these are 50-gram skeins, which give 150 meters. And like I said, it is 100% organic wool. Quite a bit of vegetable matter. One thing I'm really not loving about the Bordeaux especially, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there are just a lot of like white fluffy bits. And as I'm knitting up, it sometimes just kind of looks like the sweater is like really linty, or like I have a cat or something. So I feel like I'm gonna have to like lint roll this before blocking, which is fine. I'll give you another look at the tweed bits. It is a pretty gorgeous yarn. Now, if you're familiar with the Dream Sweater, you'll notice that I have eliminated one of the major like design features of the sweater, and that is that the sweater has these like stripes of texture. And I did include those textured stripes for my swatch. I did like how it looked, and I did like how it blocked. It blocked out pretty flat. I just have this fear that if I include those textured stripes, that they will sort of pull the yarn and make it sort of pucker, and make the stripes stick out more than I would prefer them to. And I just didn't really want a sweater with textured stripes. So I think what I will do is I will include them once I get to the yoke, because I do really love how they look with the color work. And then I think also just to add a little bit more interest to the sweater, I think once I start on the second sleeve, I will do a little bit of color work near the cuff. I do think I'm making pretty good progress. I have a little under a month to finish it before the party at EweKnit Toronto, which I will be attending. So if any of you are going there, please let me know and come say hi to me. That would be so cool to actually meet people from the knitting YouTube space. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing how this knits up, how it blocks, how it looks in the end without those stripes of texture. As usual, I really wanted a tubular or sewn or Italian or Kitchener cast on edge, but I didn't actually feel like doing the cast on. I'm just really not in the mood for that lately. I'd much rather do a bind off. So I just did a long tail cast on beginning at the stockinette. I knit up a whole ball of yarn to here, and then I went back, picked up all of these stitches, and now I'm doing the 1x1 ribbing, and I will do a tubular bind off. I'm just far more in the mood for that lately. I'm excited to see how much progress I will make by the time I film the next episode. And now, acquisitions. I have decided that I am no longer going to express my guilty feelings about my yarn acquisitions, because I am an adult, and if I want to buy yarn, I'm going to buy yarn. And I don't want the negativity of that kind of guilt, and you guys don't want to hear it either. So instead, I'm going to celebrate my acquisitions and the beautiful, beautiful yarn that I welcome into my life. So first up, I have a yarn that I am so excited to try. I don't know if I've heard a lot about this particular yarn, but I have heard a lot about the brand. So this is the CaMaRose Midnatssol. I looked it up on Google, and I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. Midnatssol. Midnatssol? Something like that. It is Danish, and like I said, it is by CaMaRose. So this is a really, really interesting yarn. It is 54% baby alpaca, 36% tencel, which is like one of my favorite fibers on this planet, and 10% merino wool. And this is the color Lys Beige, which means light beige. And I also found out that Midnatssol means midnight sun, which is so lovely. One thing that I find with like a mohair silk blend is that when you hold it in your hand, you're almost, or at least I'm almost, unaware of the silk strand, because all you can really feel is the fluff. Do you know what I mean? Whereas with this yarn, I can really feel the strands. I don't know if that's like a weird thing to comment on, but I mean, there's certainly less fluff with this. But yeah, it's just so beautiful. And I feel like it would be really, really warm too. Oh, I'm so excited to make something with this. So I did purchase a sweater quantity, and what I have in mind, I don't know if it is the Mohair Gallant sweater or the Mohair Gallant sweater. But either way, it's a beautiful pattern by Kadri. I recently purchased like 3 or 4 of her patterns. I think it was 4. When she released the Dartmoor sweater, she had a sort of a bundle coupon. I'm super into the lace weight kind of meshy, gauzy, somewhat see-through sweaters. I think those are gorgeous, and I need one in my life. So I think it'll be neat to pair something like that with a very warm wool. I feel like this would be a really great alternative to mohair if you have an allergy or a sensitivity. It is lace weight, of course, and it does have that bit of fluff, particularly from the alpaca. I don't know how much you can see, but speaking of mohair, I do have some very exciting mohair purchases. So first up, we have this. This is by Skein Study, which is the house brand of my local yarn store, Hin Yarn Studio in Hamilton. The colorway is called Chill Out. And yeah, it is more lilac, lavender. I need it in my life right now. So this is a 70% kid mohair, 30% silk, 25 grams, 236 yards. I'm very conflicted about this yarn because my thought was to make a pair of socks with these. There's a free sock pattern. I think they're just called like luxury socks, luxurious socks, something like that. And they use mohair and they're just, you know, a vanilla sock, but they look really, really beautiful, really comfortable. And my feet have been so cold lately. So I thought that I would use this to make just a really beautiful pair of socks. But looking at it, I'm almost like, can I do that? Like, can I put these on my feet? They're just so beautiful. It seems like a waste to stick them on my feet. But I'm also not really sure what I can do with just 2 skeins. I could potentially make a hat, so I think I will sit on these for a little while longer, but I just had to show them to you. They're just so, so beautiful. I'm not sure how the colors will show up in the video. I think it's pretty close, but it's definitely a more like muted lavender color. They're definitely on the pricier side, you know, very small batch, independently dyed yarn. So yeah, it just feels very, very precious, very special. I'm going to have to think about it, I think. We have come to what I believe is the showstopper of the episode, and that is this. This is the Lace Lamé yarn by Lang Yarns. This is a lace weight mohair yarn. As you can see, it is 55% mohair, 30% silk, 8% polyester, and 7% nylon, with those last 2 fibers, of course, allowing for this beautiful rose gold, shiny, lovely strand here. And I do try to be mindful of the synthetic fibers that I purchase. I definitely don't buy anything that is 100% synthetic, and you know, absolutely no judgment on anyone else that does. I just feel like I am in a position to consider the environment in that particular way, so while I can, I will. But I will allow myself certain things like having nylon in sock yarns, and I will let myself have the occasional bit of beauty. And for this, I'm thinking I will make a hat. I'm not sure which one. Isolde, I think, recently put out a beret pattern, or somewhat recently. So I am sort of toying with the idea of making that. I've never knit a beret before. I've never owned a beret before. But I'm someone who does really love interesting pieces, interesting accessories. So that one is definitely a possibility. If not that, I think I will stick to one of those sort of standard beanie style hats with like the folded brim. I think this would be really lovely for that too. This was also quite expensive. I think it was $28 Canadian plus tax. You do get, how much here? 310 meters. So you do get a fair bit. It's packed in there pretty tightly, but oh God, it's just, it's so, so pretty. They also have an olive color that I am just like dying to make. There's also an olive color that I am like dying to make a sweater out of, but that would make for a very, very expensive sweater, and it's not really in the cards right now. Maybe after I buy a freezer, after I buy a new yarn swift, after I buy a new ball winder, then we'll think about buying a sweater quantity of this shiny lace lame yarn. When I purchased the sweater kit for my dream sweater from Unit Toronto, I picked something else up, as I am wont to do, and I grabbed this really lovely skein by Riverside Studio, which is a yarn dyer from Quebec. And it is this, what does it say here? Superwash Merino nylon sock. The line is called Super Sock. and it is in the color Goa, I believe is how you pronounce it. And I just couldn't resist. I had to buy another sock yarn because people are just making gorgeous sock yarns out here. Like, look at these colors. How could I not buy this? And it's so funny that I keep buying things that are either just straight up purple or, you know, this like purpley plum color, because I kept telling myself that like I don't really like purple anymore. I used to be a huge fan of purple. In fact, for pretty much my whole life, my favorite color has swapped between purple and green. But I think I just had like some weird shades of purple in my wardrobe, and so I got rid of it all and I was like, I don't really like purple. But this I just love. I don't know if I would wear a sweater in this color. I might. I don't know. It's just so gorgeous. Don't really know what else to say about it. It's just a really stunning sort of standard sock yarn. Lots of plies in here, so it does look like it would be pretty sturdy. It has some nylon in there. Yeah, I think they'll make some really beautiful socks once I get through all of the other sock yarn that I have recently acquired. That's it for the knitting. Every time that I edit one of these videos, I'm like, oh, I should have added like a real life section, a real life update, because I really love those segments of other knitting podcasts. But now that I'm here and now that I've actually remembered, I can't think of anything. And honestly, my whole life has just been working, knitting, and watching YouTube. I'm watching a lot of like Game of Thrones lore videos, lots of knitting podcasts, obviously. There is actually a TV show that I am like super, super excited for. It just started on November 17th, last night, and it is called 1899. I know that it's on Netflix, and it is made by the same people who made the TV show Dark, which is like one of my absolute favorite TV shows. It's perfection. So they've made a new show, 1899. I started the first episode last night and I'm really, really excited. Just anything those people make, I am down to watch. And it was kind of interesting because as I was watching, I could feel myself itching to make a Magnolia Bloom cardigan by Camilla Vad. And the reason is, when I first started to watch Dark for the very first time, I was knitting one of those, and it didn't actually work out because at the time I was just about to order my set of Chiaogu interchangeables. So I think I was like getting ready to make the purchase, or I was waiting for it to arrive, something, but I didn't have the needles that I needed for that cardigan. But I didn't have anything else on the go, and I was just desperate to knit it. So I grabbed some yarn that I had, I grabbed some needles that I had. I was like, I'm not going to swatch, I'm just going to knit and see what happens. I just wanted to knit that badly. So I ended up knitting over half of the cardigan. And I just sort of kept telling myself as I was knitting, like, oh, it'll work, it'll be fine, it'll be okay. But then, you know, I put it on and it was just like, I could wrap it around me almost twice. It was so big. So I did rip it all out. But it was just such a joy to knit, even though there are some things with the pattern that you do need to notice. It's not the most mindless knit in the world, which isn't great for a show like Dark unless you speak German. It's a German show, it has subtitles. Do not watch the dub. Don't do it. Subtitles, please, I beg you. So now I'm like a little bit sad that I can't knit another Magnolia Bloom, hopefully with the correct gauge, the correct needles, while I watch this show. But maybe I can just like try to knit my dream sweater super, super quickly, and then I can start one. Oh, there are just so many. The hardest part about knitting, in my opinion, is not any technique. It's not knitting a particular product or category. The hardest part about knitting is choosing what to knit and like settling on the next thing to knit, because I always have like 12 things that I want to knit at any given moment. I wish I had another set of hands. Other than my media consumption, I think the only new thing in my life is that I bought a new plant, which I'm really excited about. It's super, super cute. I've also set up a little sewing area in my room, but I think I'll talk a little bit more about that later and show it to you at another time. I need to get back to my knitting, so that's where I will leave you today. Thank you so much for spending more of your time with me. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I certainly did, and I will see you next time. Bye. Bye. No, I just need to start that over. Oh.